Hi everyone, Sam here from Accuracy Obsession. I'm going to show two series of videos. The first one that I'm going to do here is how to disassemble and debond your AI action in preparation for the new Obsession chassis. And then once everything's debonded, taken apart and cleaned, I'll do a second video that shows how to bond everything back together to the new chassis, get everything aligned, and make sure everything fits perfect. So I'll just get started here. Everything we're going to do, I'm showing it on my AX. I have an AT strip chassis that I'll show you the differences if there are any, but basically it's a real similar process. So the first thing you want to do, obviously you take your bolt out, take your scope off, any accessories, take that stuff off, just strip it down. And to start out, we're going to take everything off of the action. So if you've got an AT like this, you're going to have to take all the skins off. So there's a couple screws here, you've got your grip panel, and then you've got your rear buttstock skins. So I'm going to show you this process for the AX, and I'm going to take the AX buttstock off. If you have an AT and you're going to be putting a brand new AX buttstock onto the Obsession chassis, you don't need to take the buttstock off of your AT. You can just leave it on there, you don't have to go through the hassle. With the Obsession chassis, you can put the AT buttstock on it or the AX. Either way, it's interchangeable, so it's up to you. If you're going to be taking your buttstock off the AT, putting it on the new chassis, then follow this process all the way. If not, you can kind of skip ahead. So I got the screws removed here. The grip panel, there's two screws here on the rear panel, and then you've got your two side grip panels. If you have an AX, and you don't have the thumb rest, you'll have to take an additional piece off for that stock capture that goes there. Otherwise, there's just the three screws there. So you take those off, set them aside. Then what we've got here is, if it's on the AT, you're going to have a flush cup on either side. If you've got the AX, you're going to have a flush cup on one side, and you're going to have this metal flange on the other. And also, please remember, this is a left-handed rifle, not right-handed, so if something's looking opposite, that's why. So to take this off, basically you need your 2.5 millimeter, and sometimes these are real tight. Some people say they get stripped out. The tip that I have that's gotten it to work is just take a pliers or channel lock, whatever, and on one side, real gentle, you can squeeze this flange part. I already have it loosened, and you can use that to break the other side loose. Sometimes they'll sort of turn together, but then basically all you need to do is remove this. And if you're keeping your buttstock, like your AT or your AX, make sure you put these aside and save them, because you're going to reuse these on the new chassis. And take that off. Now we can remove the magazine catch and spring. One thing that's really important to note here, I think most people are going to be taking an AT and going to the Obsession chassis. This stock catch and spring and dowel from the AT to the Obsession is a direct swap. If you're doing an AX, you have to get two new parts, the catch and the spring. The dowel rod is the same. I'll include those part numbers in the instructions. I ordered mine from Mile High Shooting. I think this catch was like 30 bucks. Unfortunately, because of the mag design, they are different. So if you're going to debond your AX, you're going to need to call up Mile High, get that catch and spring. So, simple thing here. Roll pin punch. This is a 3/32. There's a dowel pin. Make sure you keep that regardless of which chassis you have. And then you've got a spring. And a catch, again, if it's an AT, make sure you save that. You're going to use that for later, those 3 parts. Next step, 4mm. Take out the whole trigger pack. There's 2 bolts. I have mine loosened a little bit here. They shouldn't be on too tight. And take the whole trigger pack out. Obviously you're going to be using this on the Obsession chassis. It's a good time to take it out, clean it with some lighter fluid if it feels a little gritty, or swap out the comp trigger. I have the comp trigger here so you can see all of the ridiculous adjustments it's got to get it dialed in. And at this point we're pretty much ready to take the buttstock off. So what we're gonna do is, this joint here is where the buttstock is actually bonded. So there's a metal tang here that it's glued to, and there's 2 screws. I think they're 3mm. And if these are tight at all, just wait until they get hot. So don't force that and strip that out. Mine's bonded in there. They get glue inside of there, so I would just leave it, and we'll heat it up and we'll take it off there. So what I'm going to do is turn this, and this is in my vise. It's just, I have a basic, I don't know the brand of vise with the barrel. It seems to be the easiest way that I found to do it. If you have a vise that you can hold the actual chassis down, you can, but rather than scratching that up, I do it this way. So tighten this down. One thing that's nice if you're taking your AT buttstock off is you're going to heat this joint up, and you're just going to hammer on this. It's really easy. The AX, there's not really anything great to hammer it on without potentially damaging it. Obviously the cheek piece is plastic, you'll break that. This joint here, there's not real much meat, and if you do something like this where you've got a pick rail or something, it's going to be a little awkward. So what I do, and this is going to be a little funky, is I have a 1x2, and I put that inside of this little machined pocket and basically use leverage to my advantage. So what I'm going to do is I have one end up against my workbench and the other end here inside of it. I'm going to hit on this with a hammer to try to drive it off. The whole table's going to shake and everything. It's going to be real loud, but we'll see if we can get that to work on camera and not take forever. So what I have found works best is a little propane torch. Heat gun, you can get it to work, but I found it's just way more work than it's worth. And it ends up taking forever. So I'm going to kind of zoom in here, show you what I do. So basically you want the front half of the joint here. You don't need to heat up this back part, and only the front 2 screws are what we're going to remove. And for the AT you can kind of just go nuts because it's anodized. For the AX it's Cerakoted, so I'm going to try to be a little more cautious about it. So I'm just going to go around, heat it up, and kind of get inside of that hole. Get the bottom of it. So first I'm going to try to get the screws off. Obviously it's not going to go anywhere if you don't remove the screws first. So get some heat right on the top of it. Let's try to take that off. 3mm. So that comes off right there. Try the bottom one. Bottom one came loose. I'm going to take those out. I'm going to include 2 of these screws in the kit so you don't have to reuse them. Hopefully you didn't strip them out or anything, but if you did round the head, there should be a couple more in there. Alright, so screws are out, so now we're just going to focus on heating up the epoxy. Grab your mallet or dead blow hammer, something pretty big. I didn't have good luck with a regular hammer. Had to really kind of give it some muscle. Also, if it's something getting hot, I've got, you know, like this heat resistant glove. That seems to help a bit too if you're trying to touch it, grab it. So you can kind of point that flame inside the hole too. Basically this whole thing is just covered in epoxy, and the epoxy has a working range up to 250 F. So you've got to get this thing pretty good and hot for it to start to budge. Then once it starts to budge, you're pretty good. So this is just going to be a matter of heat it and beat it. And once you're done heating it, you kind of want to work fast, give it a couple hits, and just keep the heat on it. And that came right off, so that worked pretty well. So what we've got here is this is the female part of the tang. This is the male part of the tang. So if you're leaving this chassis, you don't really need that again. But what you want to do with this hot, I'm not going to do this on camera because it's pretty self-explanatory, but this is where I like to use a heat gun rather than the torch, is you're going to want to take a razor blade, a sharp screwdriver. I like to use an X-Acto set. I have a kit, and scrape off everything. So the inside of it, you see, has some gunk in there from the epoxy and this mating surface. So get that clean to bare metal, make it look like it's brand new, clean it with some isopropyl alcohol, and that'll make it ready to rebond onto the new chassis. So this I'm just going to set aside because I'll clean this off camera. You guys get the gist. Set that aside. Careful because this is probably kind of hot still. And the next step is going to be to debond the action. So since I have an AX, it's a little bit of a unique situation because it's fully Cerakoted, and I don't really want to hit the Cerakoted interface with the propane torch. So with the AX and with the Obsession chassis, what you see is it's raised over the actual bonded line, and it's obviously Cerakoted, which you could burn it a bit if you put the propane right to it. With the AT, it's nice and easy because the action the whole way the side is exposed. So with this, you can use a heat gun or use that propane torch, keeping it on the chassis. I wouldn't want to put the torch right on the steel action, and heat it up just like we did with the buttstock, and get that epoxy to melt so you can peel it away. So what you got to do, and I'll loosen this back up, is loosen the action screws. Which there's 2 in front, 2 in the back. Those are going to be 4mm. Now make sure you have a nice fitting 4mm. And if there's a lot of resistance, or you feel like something isn't going to budge, I would advise putting a little heat on it. So a soldering iron, you could touch it with the torch, just something to get those screws started. So with the AT, if you've got this thing in your barrel and you're going to heat it up with a heat gun, just take the screws completely out. What I'm going to do for the AX, which I've done a couple times already so I know it works, is put this whole thing in my kitchen oven. So I'll loosen the screws a couple turns, but leave them in, take the barrel off, and I'm going to put the whole, this is the chassis and the action, in my oven at 250 F for 1 hour. So the Cerakote curing temp is 250 to 300, so I know that won't damage it. The epoxy temp is 250, where it starts to just become liquid and soft. And basically I put it in the oven. When I take it out of the oven, it's just going to peel right apart. I'm going to do that off camera, bring it back and show you guys. But at this point, if this was an AT, and my action screws, now these rear action screws, make sure you do not lose these. You have to save them and use them on the Obsession chassis. The front action screws are different. So with the rear ones, they're like a custom machined profile from AI. So they have a real small diameter head. So make sure no matter what, AX or AT, you save those. So I'm gonna, like I said, I'm just gonna put these back in, because when it comes out of the oven, I don't want the thing to fall apart. And the front action screws. These ones, when you remove them all the way, just put them in your bag of parts from all your AT chassis stuff. You won't be reusing them on the Obsession chassis. Obviously, since the fore end is so much different, the screws that I use are a lot shorter. So at this point, you could be heating this up, and once it's hot, you'll be able to just peel it off completely. And when the action is separated from the chassis, you're going to do the same thing as the buttstock. Heat it up, scrape everything off of the action, and prep it for bonding it back together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go take this, throw it in my oven, and come back and show you guys what it looks like, what you're going to be looking for, how to clean it up, and then we'll go to the next step.